Hey everyone, before we get into this week's episode of Talk of the Town, I want to talk about a big sponsor of the podcast, that being Zencastr. Zencastr is now the all-in-one solution for making podcasting easy. It's the ultimate web-based podcasting solution that I even use for Talk of the Town. It provides high-quality audio and video production and hosting, as well as a full suite of professional tools that podcasters can seamlessly use to record, produce, and publish from one all together platform. The other thing I really love is that they also have ways for podcasters to make money through its ad network, and also they recently came out with a cool feature called Zen AI, which allows their AI software to make clips for your podcast that you can put onto YouTube, TikTok, and other places. Make sure to go check them out in the show notes down below. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to Talk of the Town. This is a podcast where we talk about all things media, creators, business, and more. My name is Tristin. I'm the host of the podcast, and today I have a really special guest, someone who has been on a bucket list of people I wanted to talk to. I would normally introduce this person, but I think that I couldn't do as good of a job. So, Jonathan, introduce yourself.
Perfect. Thank you for having me, Tristin. Really excited to be on this podcast. I'm Jonathan Chang. My full-time job I work as an XIR at Brex. I'll get into what an XIR is a little bit later in the show. Outside of that, I run a venture capital syndicate called DayDream Ventures, investing in Gen Z founders or founders who are building for Gen Z, as well as the founder of GenZscouts, which is a program to help students break into venture capital, especially who are students from non-target universities. Before this, I was working at a venture fund called GSV in EdTech, so early stage EdTech investing, and I also do TikToks on the side for fun. So came in as a videographer doing photo shoots and videography for artists like Miramasa, Charlie XCX. Turned that into doing venture capital TikToks under the handle Venture Capital Guy. So that's a quick background about myself, but really just happy to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. And a little bit of a side note, you probably put out some of the best TikToks that I watch on a consistent basis. And you know, obviously, again, super knowledgeable about the VC space. So I love the content that you're putting out there, and love seeing like the growth that you've been having as of recently.
Appreciate it. No, thank you. It's TikTok has been really fun. I got I guess when I started doing TikToks for venture capital, first of all, I wasn't expecting to do TikToks for venture capital. Didn't have the name Venture Capital Guy yet. Was literally doing TikToks about videography. They didn't do that well. Was doing TikToks about cooking. They didn't do well. Did like a series about making kombucha, which was pretty interesting. And I did this was like probably October of 2020, did a video on venture capital. Did well, got like 1,000 views, which was more than I had combined for my rest of these other videos. And I was like, okay, there seems to be something here. Forgot about TikTok. And after like I think another month, decided, hey, let me start doing more TikToks. There wasn't really any VC TikTokers at the time, so it was definitely a super niche space. One got really viral. I think it got almost 400K views, and I'm like, okay, let's go somewhere with this. Changed my name to Venture Capital Guy, and basically decided, all right, I'm just gonna do venture capital TikToks from now on. Been trying to grow. We hit 10K about I think 3 months ago, and hopefully well on our way to 11K soon.
Absolutely. So, first question, is venture capital always something that I guess like growing up that you wanted to get into, or what kind of sparked your interest in venture capital?
Yeah, venture definitely did not even know. I didn't even know what venture capital was in high school or even I think like until the end of my freshman year in college. What I wanted to do growing up was I guess something in the stock market, or I guess little me thought investment banking. Realized really quickly I did not want to do investment banking. But when I was a kid growing up, my parents would always get me into stocks. My mom taught me the importance of investing, and I was like, huh, I really like picking stock companies and investing. So I thought I wanted to do something in the investing side. At the same time, I was a huge sports fan, read the book Moneyball like 20 times, and I was like, I want to do something with sabermetrics. I want to go work at a front office of a baseball team because I want to be the GM. I think I can choose the best players. I loved player scouting, which was very interesting, and I wanted to do something in that space. When I got to college, didn't know what I wanted to do yet. Came in as an economics major, realized really quickly I did not want to do investment banking. So I was like, all right, what am I going to do now? Quickly changed my majors to become a stats major because sabermetrics. And I was like, okay, time to see if I actually really want to do the sports thing. At the same time, joined a few clubs on campus because my family is, I have a family full of entrepreneurs. One of my cousins, he's a venture-backed founder. The other one was also another venture-backed founder, got sold to Square in 2015 or something like that. But growing up, it was like I had a family full of entrepreneurs that I've seen do really great things. So it was always in the back of my mind. Like I knew about startups, but I didn't know what venture capital was. I joined a few startup orgs on campus at UCLA, joined something called Bruin Ventures, as well as Sigma Eta Pi, which was an entrepreneurship fraternity. And there is where I met people who were like, hey, you should check out this thing called venture capital. So I basically did just that. And, it was really interesting. I liked venture capital enough where I thought, hey, this could be something I have a career in, but I wasn't committed on it. I interned at Accelerator, interned at an agricultural venture fund, and I liked it a lot. And then afterwards, I was like, I have time to leave venture because I was still a college student. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do. So I left and basically joined Lionsgate. Was a head of it was a investor relations intern at Lionsgate, which was really interesting. And then I went to Universal Pictures to do work on their home entertainment team. Learned about the film industry, realized I never want to do step foot in Hollywood again. And mainly because it was just big companies, like 80,000 person companies, where there's one day I was like, my roommate was like, hey, let's go to the beach. And I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be at work. I didn't have any work because at that point, my internship, my manager left. So I didn't really have a manager. So I didn't have anything. And I was like, all right, no one's going to notice I'm gone. Went to the beach with my roommate, great time. And I was like, all right, these big companies, if you're not there, no one notices you're gone. So versus at a startup, you're at a 10, say 5, 10% company, if you're gone, you're noticed immediately. So decided from then I wanted to do startups, did everything, was working data science at the startup called Yumi out of LA. I loved it. I didn't think I was going to do venture after college. I thought I was going to work data science. COVID hit, got laid off because of COVID because they're like, hey, we can't afford interns anymore. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. And ended up getting a job at a venture fund called Gideon Ventures, moved that into GSV, and it's just stuck, Been doing that ever since, and now after GSV at Brex.
I love how, as someone who's a Los Angeles native, you got into the entertainment industry and realized just how much of a mess it sort of is. Which is always like a joke I talk about with people who like are going for like a new media degree or a film and TV degree, and I'm like, realize that everything is extremely convoluted, that things are way more complicated than they probably should be, and like it is going to be an absolute burner on you. And so like I love that, and big Lionsgate fan with all the stuff they put out, and same with Universal. So certainly I love that connection. That's something that I'm sure amazing time that you had there. So what are some of the first things that you sort of learned going through venture capital that like a lot of people probably wouldn't realize, and also that that you were probably surprised about?
Yeah. Um, I think a few things. One was I got really lucky because my first venture capital gig at Good Ventures was they were a merging fund. It was three partners with two of us who are associates at the time, and who are raising their fund one. So it was very different than going into like an established venture fund, like a Andreessen or like a Greylock, Sequoia, etc. And it was very different because you learn about everything, not only just investing, but you learn how do you manage LPs, how do you reach out to LPs, how do you do everything that's really hidden, which is being sort of like, how do you be an admin for a fund, like everything offside as well, which I think is really important. I tell everyone who's looking to get into venture, kind of split your time between an established fund and a super early stage venture fund because you get two really different perspectives. One is how do you become a really good investor, but two is how do you eventually become a move up in the venture ranks, because it's really hard to do. And by looking at emerging managers, you kind of get a really good picture of how to do it. Um, and after that, you know, the biggest thing is how do you build your brand as a VC? You see a lot of these Gen Z VCs who are going into the venture space, and you've seen them build amazing brands. They're doing a really, really great job. And it's really interesting because out of all these Gen Z investors, pretty much all of them, right now, you can't really say they're great investors yet because venture takes 7 to 10 years to figure out a thesis. Everyone who's big on Gen Z VCs like Twitter, they're great at VC because part of VC is building up a really good brand, helping founders. Are they great investors yet? No one knows. Time will tell because you don't know how validated their thesis is until 5, 10 years down the road. So the best thing to do as a Gen Z VC, in my opinion, is how do you solidify that brand? How do you create a thesis that you think is going to win and basically build your brand off that thesis? And fingers crossed, 5 years from now, you become big because your thesis works.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like when I was launching the VC side of Spark, last May, like that was one of my biggest things is like building the thesis out for the first time and, trying to like figure, what companies are we going to invest into? Like, how is everything going to play out? And, luckily it at least played out very well for us, but you bring up a very good point that most like VCs, it takes 5 to 10 years to really get like a good track record going, because like it's just so hard to stand out right now. Like, the sort of joke I made with someone the other day is that like everyone and their pet cat wants to make a VC fund right now, or is trying to do it. And at the same time, it's just kind of annoying, like navigating through that crowd of people when you're really passionate about it versus like someone who's just like, ooh, dollar signs. So I certainly agree with you there. And again, I love how you really focus in on Gen Z because this is an area that a lot of people one, obviously, we're in that era of Gen Zs and people, but also it's an area that is so disruptive right now. Like, you think about the way that culture is shaped in the last 10, 20 years with streaming, with sneaker and lifestyle stuff, and just everything in general. I mean, really, there's no better group of people in any era of human history that is disrupting the way that we live.
Exactly, exactly. I think it's really interesting. I think the whole Gen Z space is really interesting per se as well. And why it is interesting, in my opinion, is we are so different from millennials. We are so different from, Gen X and the boomers. We grew up, and why is because we grew up in an era of being digital natives that no other generation has. Us, I'm born in 1998, so we're kind of on the cusp. I didn't get a
Yeah.
smartphone until high school, but I had Facebook since sixth grade. For kids who were probably born 4 years after me, who are probably in college right now, they were more born like they were probably in first grade when Facebook was a thing. They probably don't know what like a those tape recorder that you slide into the TV things were that I kind of barely remember, but it's very different. And even now, like Gen Z, I believe goes to like what 2005 or something. So
Yeah,
now these like 16, 18-year-old kids still in high school, they're grown up with TikTok. Like I grew up, my high school was Snapchat. Snapchat was the big thing. Now it's
yeah,
TikTok.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
I remember, God, what was it? I was in middle school and I had a YouTube, Facebook. Instagram had been around, but hadn't started using Instagram until 2014. Um, and like on top of that, like I remember some of the more obscure places like MySpace and Kick and a couple of other places that people when I was in middle school and eventually high school used like. So it was crazy. I mean, definitely, like people have grown up in this sort of like Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok culture. Um, I mean, like, and it's funny I say this because, like, I'm only 23 and I collect vinyls and cassettes and all sorts of like different types of music items. So it's like I get where you're coming from.
exactly, exactly. It's interesting. Um, it's it's an interesting space for sure. And I think it's like a lot of VCs kind of recognize how do we invest in Gen Z. But in my opinion, I think what's missing per se, it's like this. You can't, if you brand yourself a Gen Z fund, that's getting you nowhere. You don't have a thesis. I don't really believe Gen Z is a thesis. I believe it's if how you become successful is yeah, I'm investing in Gen Z, but my theses areas of focus is this, this, and this. Like it's like crypto funds. If you just say, "Hey, I'm a crypto fund" without any actual like theses backing it, you're not going to succeed. And I think early venture, like early 2021, I saw a lot of Gen Z funds be like, oh, hey, we're Gen Z just to be Gen Z. I admit, my syndicate, I briefly had an issue where we didn't have an identity besides Gen Z until I thought about it. And I'm like, we need to change this because we are, a Gen Z fund, yes, but how we differentiate ourselves from everyone else, which is crafting theses through writing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you just described literally 95% of every crypto fund out there in one sentence too, which is it's perfect given the climate that we're in right now with crypto. It's certainly kind of a fun thing, and that's actually something I want to touch on is, you see a lot of venture companies and funds getting into crypto, and we obviously just had the huge blow up with FTX and Sequoia and all these bigger, institutional investors. What is your take on like what happened from a venture capital standpoint? And at the same time, like, do you think that venture capital funds are going to be scared to touch any company in the Web3 or the crypto space, given what happened with FTX?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think a few things. It's like FTX crypto. What I categorize is there's two types of venture capital funds. One is, these really smart investors. You know who they are. These are really great crypto investors. They write really, really well on a lot of things. They have really good opinions. The others is everyone else, which or it's like dumb money. Money that probably made a lot of, they had a lot of money somehow and basically just threw it at companies that were considered hype. Very hyped up companies that probably, if you look at today, they have no biz chance. No way they should have been venture funded. But the thing is, at that point in time, everyone had money to invest. And which led to these investors like, hyping up rounds, throwing money. And then you see, it's like investor A sees that investor B is throwing money in, and you're like, oh, shoot, I got to join in on the round as well. And then like five other investors see that these two guys are in and they join. So it's a lot of dumb money, in my opinion, that are coming in. Will there still be crypto? Like, was crypto VCs still going to be around? Absolutely. I think the best crypto VCs who know what they're doing are still going to be around, still investing in their theses. A lot of these investors that probably are now like imploded or just investing in a lot of bad decisions. I don't think they'll be back even in like the general venture space moving forward. Depends. Some who just started out as crypto investors, probably not. But venture funds who rebranded themselves as a crypto-focused venture fund are probably just going to get back into Web 2. But it remains to be seen. Not too sure what's going to happen with this space, but I think, it happens in crypto. 2017 crash. What we saw, people building behind the scenes and building some really cool things that led to our bull run last year.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the funniest part of the whole FTX story was, and this was the only thing where I genuinely laughed about it, was how they were someone published an article where they talked about how SBF had literally been playing League of Legends in the middle of like investor pitches, and I was like, as a gamer, I can sort of respect that. And then eventually, I think by like the end of the week, someone found his League of Legends profile and they're like, oh, he's a mid player at best. And I'm like, that's I was like, that's beautiful to find that out, and like put all the terminology together. So absolutely. So this is the point in time with the podcast where I'd like to turn the tables over to you, let you become the host, bring up questions, topics, and everything from your side of the world.
Amazing. No, super, super excited. I think one thing that I've been really interested in is the fact that how has, when you look at venture and startups, it's gotten so intertwined with everything from entertainment to athletics, sports, and TikTok influencers. Hell, like, you see some of the best investors, Charlie D'Amelio,
Yeah.
LeBron James, and where there's no line between, it's like an athlete is an investor, influencer is an investor, where everything's sort of blending into one. I know you personally, you're interested in like film, media, entertainment.
Yeah.
How have you seen, I guess, this space get closer into venture capital? I'm curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely people who are involved in the venture space. Like, you sort of have like your ninjas and Mr. Beast who are, and like most probably prolific for somewhat investing in the space. Obviously, Mr. Beast with Night Media and Night Capital and everything they're doing. And then like on the other side of things, like you have a lot of your finance guys like Nate O'Brien, Graham Stephan, tons of other creators who have been investing in that space. So it's certainly that like I've seen a lot of, and I think that it's a really good thing actually when like a lot of these influencers or creators really try to engage about startup investing or just like the whole world of startups through their content that they're doing, and that's something that I obviously if I'm able to get out of the Midwest, I'd love to be able to start doing, where like hanging out with people and just being able to do that, so I see that happening. I think there will be a lot of entertainment and creator focused companies hopefully going into more startup raising. I've been actually advocating for a lot of creator economy companies to open up crowdfunding rounds or community rounds, because there's no point in just venture raising when you're trying to build something that's based off of a creator and their community. It's like you have the perfect trickle down effect of marketing where it's like, hey, we get influencers onto the platform and then we get them to buy into the product, and also we get them to invest in the company. It's like, that's, there's a couple of different companies that we've invested into that are in the entertainment space. Not necessarily the creator space, but, there's one company that I'm, getting ready to announce here in a couple of weeks that we've done a Reg A deal with, and I'm excited for that announcement because it's a company that I know very well, and I think uh, will help elevate us.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I agree a lot. And I guess love to sort of hear, what do you think the future, you talk about creator economy a lot. What do you think is the future of the creator economy? I'm really curious on that because we saw a really, really big boom in 2020, TikTok, the rise of TikTok, the rise of the creator economy. I haven't really seen a great creator company come out in the last 6 months at least. Everyone's sort of building the same thing. I personally have my own theses on where the creator economy is going to go, but I love to sort of hear from you on what do you think is going to be the next big thing in the creator economy companies? Because I don't think it's going to be link in bio. I think that space is already done. I
Yeah,
don't think it's going to be creator analytics. There's so many companies out there doing this, but I'm really curious. What do you think is the next like $1 billion opportunity in the creator economy space?
yeah. So I'll kind of address those separately. So from an overall economy perspective, I think that the creator economy is going to thrive more. I mean, we're starting to see this with a lot of different platforms. TikTok obviously being the one that's catapulted a lot of people. I mean, certainly if you rode the wave of Vine to Instagram to TikTok, you've certainly over the last, 6 years been doing very well for yourself. In the case of like, the Paul brothers or even others that were on Vine way back in the day. So I think that ultimately there will be room for creators to continue growing and for companies to continue servicing the space. I think the biggest thing I've always been telling companies is don't approach people from a sales perspective, like because creators will be content creators, especially influencers, we all know what to look for in a sales pitch. And we'll, be instantly shut off by that. Like I went to TwitchCon and I was doing a booth for a company and they had this intern there and wasn't a streamer, wasn't a creator. And I told him, I said, you're giving a sales pitch to creators who have been told, some of these things beforehand, or, you're giving off those same, business traditional vibes. You're not relating to that creator. And that's one of the things like I did where I spent 6 hours of my day when I could have been doing or like going to panels or hanging out with people, just running that booth alongside that guy to help him like understand like, hey, this is how you relate to people and bringing people in and showing them that product for the company, which was a link in bio company that I use and I've been using for years. So, like that was another aspect to it where it's like I've been using this company for a very long time since before some of the biggest influencers on the planet used it. So, I think, and that leads into the second thing where, the link in biospace definitely is very oversaturated, and like, the thing I talk about is like Linktree is ground zero, and then you have like Koji and Beacons and Pillar and Snipfeed and all these others that like everyone has something they're really great at. I think Koji is the only one that can really rival everyone because they have like everything that you can think of and they're free on top of that. Um, but I think what you're going to see more is companies that are doing sort of engagements and monetization a lot more of this. Like I talked to a lot of companies who are building products for fans to invest in the creators to launch their own digital collections or you sort of a membership system or just anything of the sorts like that. And then at the same time, I also think you're going to see a lot of companies also focusing on building actual physical products for creators, right? Like I love what the guys at Fourth Wall are doing with merch for creators. There are companies out there who are building physical products for creators that help them with their production, their editing, their marketing, all these sorts of different things. So there's where I sort of see things. I think the biggest area really is I'd love to see a company come into the space and really shake up sort of the audio visual market, with new equipment and sort of a renewed focus, and maybe a social media platform that kind of combines all of the best into one place for creators. I think and that's one of the things that like Elon's talked about with Twitter is eventually making it a super app. So I think that who knows what the creator economy, like the next $1 billion idea, looks like.
Amazing. But yeah, no, I think your insights about the creator economy space are really, really valid. But I'm excited to see what it's going to look like in the next 5 years, especially with how I think niche influencer marketing has gotten. There has influencers that influence everything from even the craziest things. It's like there's no matter how niche of things they are, it's like there's like influencers who focus on rock climbing. There's influencers who focus on knife reviews. It's like there's a chef on TikTok I love. He
Yeah.
focuses on like reviewing knives. And I'm like, dude, this is pretty interesting how niche, you know, TikTok influencer marketing has gone, because you look at what it was in the old days, the top influencers were like your big Hollywood celebrities.
Yeah.
That's no longer the case. People don't look at like Brad Pitt, or they don't look at like Angelina Jolie as beacons of influencer marketing. They look at niche people who the general public probably doesn't know about. But the niche is like, oh my God, I know this person. So I find that part really, really interesting. And yeah, I'm pretty bullish on where that's going to go as well.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I've always said, and I've gotten sort of flack for this, but also very like much a lot of praise for this, is I had someone who once asked me if I consider myself to be an influencer or a creator, and I stopped them and I said, I'm a content creator. I'm sure I have some influence over people in some way, but I'm not an influencer the way that you would think I am, where like I could promote a product and immediately hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are buying that product. And on top of that, it's sort of like this term of influencer gets thrown around at people, where it's like, oh, you're an influencer, you're part of the influencer culture. It's like, I'm just a content creator, and influencers are content creators at heart. So just that's what I am. I'm sure there will be a time where I sort of embrace like, hey, I am a content creator that's becoming an influencer. But at the same time, it's like I hold no influence over anybody. And I think that sort of makes me a little bit more humble. Hey everyone, before we go a little bit further in the podcast, I want to talk about a few sponsors of the podcast. The first one being Public.com. Public is an investing platform that allows everyone to invest in stocks, ETFs, crypto, and alternative assets like fine art and collectibles all in one place. I myself am a community ambassador. I've been using the platform for over the last 2 years, and I love it. It combines investing as well as social media, so you can follow people and see what they're investing in real time, and also discuss with people about things happening in the stock market or just across the world as it is today. If you guys want to sign up for Public, make sure to go check out the link in the show notes down below. And then the second sponsor is One More. One More is an award-winning professional audio brand that's committed to bringing you high-end audio solutions with studio quality sound and excellent build quality. I myself have been using One More earbuds for years, and I absolutely love them. I have multiple pairs that I take with me whenever I'm traveling, whenever I'm out and about, and I love the quality. And especially some of their earbuds are tuned by Grammy Award-winning sound engineers, which means that you are getting the best possible quality across the board. If you want to go check out some of their products and buy, you'll see a link in the show notes as well. Let's get back to the episode. As far as other questions or topics, did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, nothing really else too much now.
All right, awesome. Well, certainly, I appreciate you, bringing those, questions up and everything. A little side note, while we're taking a break between recording here, one thing I thought about also with, the creator economy is also the fact that a really interesting startup, I think, could be sort of a community, or not really a community, but sort of a startup helping creators launch their own physical products. Let's say like a company going out to smaller and medium-sized creators and doing the same thing that Mr. Beast did with like a Feastables, or like a Logan Paul did with a Prime, where it's like, hey, we'll create your own energy drink flavor, we'll create this, and help build that demand, like, because that's something I've always been intrigued by, and I think ultimately it can help really build like value for creators over time, because especially it's so hard getting brand deals, endorsements, or doing physical products nowadays. So I think that could be a disruption for sure with the creator space and everything.
Agreed. No, 100%.
So one thing that I'm really big on with venture capital is this area of crowdfunding and the community rounds that you see with Republic, Start Engine, WeFunder, all the different platforms around the world. Where do you see sort of the venture capital, like with traditional VCs, individual funds and startups mixing in this? Because I know from the normal perspective that I've gathered from talking to so many people is it's sort of a leave it to the individual people, or it's something where it's, hey, it's a company that already has a backing from a 500 global and dress in a Y Combinator, and then goes and does a crowdfund. But do you see that there could be eventually sort of a convergence of the two, where traditional VCs are more open to it?
It's a good question. I think slowly. I don't think it's ever going to be to a point where they're like fully open it, but it's slowly. It's like what, 5 years ago, traditional crowdfunding platforms, you look at companies on there, they're shunned. It's like, oh, why are you raising on crowdfunding? Not a lot of companies did it. Now, slowly better. You've had companies like Replit, come raise on, I believe Replit raised on WeFunder. You've had a few really good, Republic companies go raise on their platform as well. But at the end of the day, it's still this stigma involved, which is many of the best companies that go through investments don't are never on WeFunder or never on think crowdfunding sites like Republic either. So there's, I guess, a supply gap. Your tier A startups will probably never be raising on these platforms, which is really, really hard, in my opinion, for full transparency of the venture market. I think the goal is to see a few exits as an equity crowdfunding platform. I don't know if there are any exits yet for equity
I think
crowdfunding platforms. I'm actually really curious.
the biggest one that I know that has gone from crowdfund to IPO was Digital Brands Group, which is currently still publicly trading. So I know there's that, at least. I'm trying to think if there's been any others. I mean, I've always speculated eventually Aptera is going to, because they're like $700 million right now. And it's sort of at that point. I know there's a couple companies in the circles that I talk to that are looking at, like, they filed a couple years ago to do an IPO, and they're like now talking about like, hey, this is the last time to get in before we do the IPO, or before we officially get through the IPO process.
Yeah.
But there's certainly companies that I'm aware of that have broke into it. Again, it's a very sort of far and few between. I think that the goal that most companies have had, rather than going and getting through an IPO or a SPAC, is if we get acquired by a publicly traded company, like in the case of what happened with Figma and Adobe, then it's like, oh, we're good at the end of the day. But it's something that I do think would be really nice to see, is that, like, hey, more companies do get out into the crowdfunding space, and also eventually, companies making it all the way to the IPO stage. I've always joked that if I was like the head of the SEC right now, I'd probably put in a mandate that every company out there raising has to open 10% of their raise to crowdfunding. I know I probably would catch a lot of heat for that, but the sort of idea is like, if you're running a consumer business, if you're running a community focused or a social based business, or even if it's a social profit, or not social profit, but a social change, startup, like, absolutely, there's no discussion why you should not be crowdfunding. If people are buying products and all these sorts of different things. That's just always my belief. That again, I come from the sort of creator community space where everyone is sort of the community builds the creator gives back, and then keeps on going from there. So I mean, that's sort of my perspective on it.
Makes sense. No, really like it. Yeah, no, definitely very interesting, but I love how you shared it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the other things too is like, um, I keep on mentioning on like social media about how my VC, that being Spark, when we decide to do our first like true venture fund, we're gonna do the same thing that Backstage did, where they went on Republic. If we raised 5 million, I swear I will probably have a heart attack. Um, but the idea would be that we would literally open the entire, or not the entire, but literally like 15 to 20% of the entire uh, fund to individual investors in that format, because I think it just honestly is so impactful. And again, the fact that, like, I've talked about it, Backstage doing it, you see Nobody Studios doing a crowdfund right now. You look at all sorts of different, I mean, even like there's a company that deals sort of in the psychedelic space that is a venture studio. They're raising on WeFunder. So I've always said, like, there's examples out there if you look, and ways to make money from doing it. So I think that, who knows? I floated so many different ideas around, with people I talk to about, like, hey, this would be the way I do things. So it's certainly something where, again, I think it'd be great. And I think it would really sort of bring like the finance world, or just like culture, like full circle, because it used to be like back in my grandparents' like day, back in the 60s to 80s, where, and even a little bit in the 90s, or when they were sort of the adult age, where it's like everyone was investing in startups, even if it was risky or not, before regulation got put in place. And my grandfather comes from a wealth management background, so like I know this stuff from talking to him, where it's like and he even believes that the current model of rules are antiquated. So I think eventually you will see more funds doing a crowdfund. You'll see more companies doing crowdfunding. I think that's one of the things I love most about the Web3 space in crypto, is that, like, you can start up a digital fund, like a Solana fund 001, and
Yep.
raise tens of millions of dollars, and I mean, it's a testament to what they're doing in that area. So certainly, that's how I see things, at least.
I agree. No, I love it.
So one of the big things that I really love what you're doing is working with Brex and helping startups. Talk about first off, what Brex is, for those that don't know what Brex is, and also what you've learned from working with founders and startups through that.
So yeah, Brex is, I guess, how to best describe it, an all-in-one finance platform for founders. We work with founders from day one all the way to the day they IPO. How we do that is we have Brex Cash, which is our Brex cash management account. We have credit cards for founders. We do venture debt. We also just recently bought a company. Well, not recently anymore, but bought a company last year called Pry that is like FP&A pro forma software for founders. And how I personally help Brex, what an XIR is kind of best describe it as a venture in residence or like a community evangelist. My job is to build community in the startup ecosystem for Brex, bring founders together, bring investors together, and figure out how to best help the startup community with the resources Brex has. So we've thrown something called Brex Supper Clubs, which are intimate dinners in people's homes, as well as we have done things like breakfasts, which are doing breakfasts all around different cities. Went to events like LA Tech Week, New York Tech Week, Miami Tech Week, as well as doing a few in the beginning of last year, we did some like investor panels, what they look for when they're investing in startups. So really founder education, founder community, and bring the ecosystem together.
Yeah, I mean, I love it, and hopefully again one of these days I can actually get out to California or somewhere better than where I live here in Nebraska, and and everything. So
Yeah.
certainly really intrigued by that. Want to wrap this up by asking a question that I ask everybody, which is, what does the next year to 2 years look like for you, and what are you most excited to do, especially with this new year?
Yeah, I talk to as many founders as I can. I love talking to founders. I love talking to investors. So that's a big push I want. One of the biggest goals is there's not a lot of VC communities in SF. I really want to create this deal flow sharing community for VCs in the Bay. I think that'll be really interesting. I want to throw a conference, bring together founders, investors, athletes, and influencers this year, which I think will be really fun. But we'll see. The world of startups goes really fast. So what I like to say,
Absolutely, it
yeah,
absolutely does. I mean, definitely keep me posted on that because I'd love to attend
perfect.
for sure. I mean, any chance I get to wear a suit and enjoy nice weather and
Yep,
like, I'm all for it. So
perfect.
again,
Sounds good.
really do appreciate the time you've given me and everything, and definitely look forward to seeing what you're doing. And I definitely hope the best for you, especially with this new year and everything you're doing with GenZscouts and all that. So for those
Thank you.
listening to the podcast, watching the podcast, wherever it may be, thank you for tuning in again to a new episode of Talk of the Town. I have a lot of amazing guests that we're going to be bringing on throughout the next couple of weeks and months and everything. So definitely excited for what's to come. And also, if you want to follow the podcast on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, it is Talk of Town Pod. And with that being said, my name's Tristin, the host of the podcast, and we'll see all of you in the next one.